Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mastermind Virtual User Group. My name is Denise Belandris. I manage the customer success team here at Genomic, and we're all really excited and thankful to have you join us for this event today. I want to start by setting the stage and outlining some of our objectives and what we want to accomplish during our time together today. Can you hit the next slide for me? Thank you. So we're here to educate you about Mastermind, about our company, but importantly, what is it that users are actually doing with the Mastermind platform? And this is going to come in the form of a presentation from our keynote speaker and educational breakout sessions led by folks from the Genomic team. And we hope that with the keynote and breakouts, we will inspire you to see what is possible with the platform beyond just the software's functionality, but its broader implications and impact and how that affects your job, your clinical practice, and your research. So we're gathering Mastermind users from all over the world today, and we hope that you can make connections with each other and, of course, with the Genomic team that's here to support you. So, of course, our team wants to hear from you. We want to learn from you. We're going to sprinkle in some poll questions throughout the course of the event today to get your feedback. We aim to be really customer-centric and data-driven here at our company. So the more we learn from you, the better positioned we'll be to keep driving the Mastermind product forward and deliver the best experience possible to our users. So in addition to our keynote speaker, you're also going to get to meet experts from our team at Genomic. Can you get the next slide, please? Their lovely faces are on this slide, and you'll get to hear from each of them later today. So we have Mark Keel, Jeffrey Bissonette, Jessica Bugarin, and Brittany Jones. But with that, I'm going to pass it on to Mark Keel, who is our founder and CSO. He is going to kick things off for us.
Thank you, Denise. I hope I can be seen and heard. And thank you, everybody, for attending. As Denise suggested, these user group meetings are really important to us. The feedback that we get from our users is vital as we drive change in our offerings and the value that we provide through the Mastermind software. And so within that community, look at these numbers, look at these happy numbers. We have 30,000 registered users of Mastermind across 145 countries in many thousands of different laboratories. And already this year, those users have racked up more than 500,000 searches. So underlying each of those searches are patients and patient stories and the need to diagnose those patients accurately. Denise talked about how we're patient focused. That is, in fact, a core value of the company. Is everything that we do revolves around our thoughts regarding patients and how to improve patient care. And a flavor of that is our users. How do we better serve our users' needs who share that patient centricity? And that is the nature of this user group, is that user and patient centricity. So I've been tasked with sharing, in addition to these numbers, sharing a bit of the highlights from the year in review. And I'm going to walk through a few slides that speak to some of the positive changes that we've made over the past year, in part in response to feedback and input from our users. So we are mission-driven as a company. We are ambitious in our goals. One of those goals, as you may have heard, is to curate the germline clinical exome. And undoubtedly, our Mastermind users will know what this means as they've seen the fruits of this curation in the software itself. And many of you are embarking on the work of making that information available for patient diagnosis. So I am very pleased to announce that as of last week, we have officially attained the 50% mark in our march toward curating the germline clinical exome. So this is a momentous milestone that we've attained as a company. Some of those individuals who are responsible for attaining this milestone are on the user group meeting today. Others are not, and they come in multiple forms. Curation scientists, managers, directors, but also software developers who are building out infrastructure to allow us to do this very quickly, and then also building out the software to present that information to you. So I don't get an opportunity to do this often enough, but a huge kudos goes out to the team who may be listening today, but every day who are working on your behalf as Mastermind users. So I'm beyond thrilled to announce this milestone, and I'm looking forward to completing the next half. I was going to make a joke about it being rolling downhill because we've attained this 50% mark, but I know very well that that would be disingenuous. This is hard work. The team is working on this very diligently. And I think the fruits of that, the output of their work really shows how much they care and how much attention they pay to that. I can't highlight the year in review without talking about how we deliver value against what we're doing at Genomenon. And that comes in three flavors. Undoubtedly, everyone on the Zoom here is familiar with the software, the Mastermind software, as you use it every day. But it comes in other forms as well. And I'm going to highlight some of the progress that we've made in realizing some of that value through those other forms. And those include data files, and API calls for labs with advanced computational capabilities, as well as through our services, which some of you may be aware of, some of you may be availing, some of you may have seen notification of or actually attended the previous get-together that we had that spoke to the clinical services that we provide. But all of these offerings in their many incarnations are fueled by Genomenon's genomic intelligence. And that genomic intelligence comes in two forms. One is the computational intelligence, the artificial intelligence, the technical intelligence that we use to aggregate, to annotate, and to organize this information. And the other comes in the form of our genomic expertise. As I mentioned, you have some leading examples on this call today to present information to you. Those are our curators and our scientists, our data analysts who are looking at this data and making sure that that information is accurate and highly sensitive for your purposes. So I'm going to spend a slide on each of these different points just to very briefly highlight some of the progress that we've made this year. Regarding software, the software that you use in our clinical offering is Mastermind. We have made substantial improvements to the user experience and the user interface of Mastermind. And I want to underscore that it's based on feedback from our users. So our product team, our customer success team, they take your feedback, the insights that we gain from conversations with you extremely seriously. And Denise mentioned how we are data-driven as a company. We gather that information, we scrutinize it, and we seek to optimize the value that we can bring as a result of incorporating that feedback into our roadmap planning, which you'll hear more about toward the end of this gathering. So two things to highlight here, again, very briefly, is the launch of the gene page. And that gene page, again, was in response to users who had indicated that they very often search first at the gene level before they jump in to the variant level and would like to see more of that information. And so in response to that feedback, we organized the information and the user experience around that gene page. And some of the versions of that information include bioinformatics summary of gene information that helps guide variant curation. And another flavor is the gene disease relationships that the curation team here at Genomenon has curated at a breathtaking pace, but all the while ensuring the utmost accuracy and sensitivity in that information, the fruits of which you can see on that gene page. So this is particularly useful in combating the scourge of the VUS, especially in the case where there's a GUS or a gene of uncertain significance. The gene disease relationships that have been curated by the team and presented with the evidence necessary to adjudicate the meaningfulness of that association, that's all presented in the gene page. There's many other things to talk about there, but for want of time, I'll also highlight improvements in the user experience when you've searched on a variant. And that is on the right here in the form of the variant page or the article page, where when you've searched on a variant, you can very quickly see whether it's been curated by the Genomenon team, as I mentioned before. You have that little card of information that visually depicts the summary of that curation, and you can delve deeper into that information with a simple click, but that is front and center, again, at the request of our users. Similarly, in moving information that's needful front and center and maximizing the real estate on the user interface, we have made it easier to review those sentence fragments from each of those references that users rely on so frequently to assess the references that are indexed by Genomenon's artificial intelligence capability of genomic intelligence. And so in addition to giving more real estate and presenting more of that need to know information more clearly from the get-go, there's a lot of additional user amenities that have come as a direct result of feedback from our users. Moving on now to data. This is a new product. It's a new offering, and the team is very proud of having responded to the need from our customers, particularly labs interested in automation. Is the Mastermind software is great. They were deriving a lot of value from it. They wanted to seek to more fully automate their pipelines in practice and give their own internal computational workflows links to Mastermind elements, or actually present some of that Mastermind curated data itself, either the gene-disease relationship data that I mentioned earlier, or otherwise the curated variant data that I highlighted in our race to curate the germline clinical exome. So those two pieces of curated information in their full embodiment across the entire exome and all of the genes and variants that we've curated, that's available as a data file for our users to help automate their workflows. And similarly, all of that computationally indexed data, the variant data and ancillary data that helps you understand the meaningfulness of that variant data, that too is available through either a flat file with some information about those variants so that you can ensure that you're not missing things, as well as through an API for more sophisticated analytics to be sure that you're prioritizing that information in meaningful ways. And so again, this is a new product offering, and the response has been very encouraging from users, from groups who want to automate some of their workflow and get more out of Mastermind even faster than they were before. Lastly, in terms of our core offerings, we have very recently begun offering clinical services. And we've got a number of users who are availing one or the other of these two different flavors of clinical services. On the left, you can see is Curate Pro, which is driven by your pace, driven by the user's need to have more of that information at their fingertips. So all of that curated information at the variant level that I talked to, that can be presented to you as you need it, as you encounter variants and you'd like that information curated in that same way for your own variant analysts and variant scientists to interpret the case with that information, that is Curate Pro. In contradistinction, if you have your own protocols and you have your own idiosyncratic needs and you'd like a team member to more fully integrate with your team, we offer Genomenon Interpret, which allows you to select from our team of curators to leverage the genomic expertise that we have cultivated by training those individuals on your own protocol to further increase throughput and smooth out operations. And so those two are relatively new offerings, but have already had a great deal of uptake in the market. And also in news this year, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the clinical knowledge base acquisition. It's an asset and a team that Genomenon recently acquired from JAX, the Jackson Laboratory. And if you're unfamiliar with the CKB offering, it's extremely well curated, very thoroughly annotated, very rich and deep information about somatic gene variants and genes associated with those variants, as well as the actionable information about the drugs and clinical trials that are helpful in making diagnoses and making therapy decisions for cancer patients. So this is a beautiful complementarity between what JAX, the CKB group at JAX, has been able to do with the somatic gene curation, and what the Genomenon team has been able to do with the germline clinical exome, curating those genes and curing those variants. Putting those two together, it's hard to overstate the impact that this will have on the field of genomic medicine by serving both types of patients, rare genetic disease patients as well as oncology patients. So we're extremely excited by this acquisition. The teams are really working hard to bring this information to more of our users, and it's been a very harmonious, very fruitful integration so far. I'm looking forward to doing more and bigger things now that we have united our endeavor. And then to bring it back full circle, this is all about you. This is all about our users. This is a venue for us to get insight from our users, but also to share what some of our users are doing with you for inspiration and clarification, and to stimulate some of that feedback that we had talked about valuing so much. So I mentioned that we are mission driven, as many of you are. One of those people that I know is very mission driven and very passionate about the patients that he serves is Dr. William Lowery, who I'd like to introduce. He is our keynote speaker. He is an MD, and he's specializing in pulmonary and critical care at Alameda Hospital. He is also the chairman and founder and CEO of the Limb-Girdle Muscular Dystrophy LGMD1D DNA-JB6 Foundation, and supervises the registry of patients with autosomal disease and other. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. William Lowery to the stage. Dr. Lowery, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning and good afternoon. I'd like to share my screen here. Thank you. And again, good morning and good afternoon. I'm Dr. William Lowery. I'm a practicing pulmonary critical care physician in Alameda, California, the San Francisco Bay Area. I've been invited to share my odd 30-year journey from pulmonary physician to limb-girdle muscular dystrophy variant curator. And I hope to share information regarding the genetic diagnosis of LGMD and the tools I've assembled to help navigate these patients toward a genetic diagnosis. First, some disclosures and some general information. I do have a grant from Sarepta to purchase Mastermind Pro. And as mentioned, I am chairman of the LGMD1D DNA-JB6 Foundation and Autosomal Dominant Registry. I'm also a patient with LGMD1D, which is a late onset muscular dystrophy. I'm a member in training with the LGMD variant curation expert panel, a ClinGen affiliate, and I do not receive income for these genetic services. It's a charity outfit, basically. And again, I would like to thank Genomenon, the Genomenon team, for having me today. Now, this journey is how I got to now. Seems like a disparate collection of pieces here, but they all lead somewhat seamlessly to where I am today. But I'll go over my pulmonary background, my own diagnosis, the foundation that we started, and Invitae, the sponsored genetic panels, which have helped so many patients. And then finally acquiring Mastermind, what I call putting all the pieces together. It's been very helpful. And I'd like to conclude with what I think is the path forward and a bonus section of interesting cases if time allows. Again, my own pulmonary background, I've been doing this for 35 years, and basically my process is I diagnose, treat, and follow up, and any breach in any one of these three steps can lead to a bad patient outcome. So again, it's important to have quite a vigilant process so you don't you don't have any bad patient outcomes or lawsuits for that matter. Moving on, though, patients do not present like the textbooks. Classic is not common, so you have to be open-minded when it comes to what comes through your door, both from a pulmonary and from a limb girdle standpoint. But I think one of the best skills I've acquired over the years is listening to patients, because a patient's history, what they tell you is 85% of the diagnosis, and that includes talking to somebody over the phone, over Zoom, as was common during the COVID epidemic, or in my office. So spending time listening to patients is quite worthwhile, and it'll get you to a diagnosis, or at least in the ballpark. And finally, I think a skill that I've acquired is navigating the healthcare system and the insurance system, which frankly, I don't know how the average patient does this, but I'm able to help not only my pulmonary patients, but certainly the people who seek my help for LGMD and possibly a genetic diagnosis. So my own experience, I have to go over my family history. My mom in 1980 noticed that my granddad and my dad were slowing down, had difficulty getting out of a chair, climbing steps. And she would attend family reunions where she noticed other Lowerys were having the same problem, and it was labeled the Lowery curse. So she took it upon herself over the next decade to put together an extensive family pedigree of patients affected, and oddly enough, turned it over to Duke University. They were interested in exploring a genetic, unifying genetic diagnosis. My own clinical course, I had a reasonable childhood, young adulthood, and I didn't get weak until like early 40s. And I had a CK, a creatinine kinase, which is a muscle enzyme that's leaked out whenever there's muscle damage or muscular dystrophy. It was around 300. The cutoff was 270. So it was abnormal, but some of these muscular dystrophies, Duchenne's and other muscular dystrophies, the CK can reach 1,000, 6,000, 10,000. But over the last 20 years, my CK has been normal. So you can understand that somebody presents with a normal CK, but they have profound weakness. It could be due to muscle atrophy. So it's something to watch out for when I get a referral and a CK is normal. However, Duke University around 2001, they needed a Lowery family member to step forward for a muscle biopsy. And so I flew from California to Duke and had a muscle biopsy, which showed a very specific inclusion body myopathy. And Duke plus other international researchers were researching the same pathology, basically, and trying to find a genetic diagnosis. Which they did, and they put several variants of the DNHAB6 gene on the map that's causing LGMD1D. One means specifying an autosomal dominant disorder. LGMD2, which you'll see later, specifies autosomal recessive muscular dystrophies. Duke University did not carry the clinical baton. It was not until 2018 that I hooked up with Washington University St. Louis that seemed to be the epicenter for ongoing clinical research regarding LGMD1D. This was a paper put out by Duke University in 2012, along with international collaborators, putting the DNHAB6 variants on the map as far as the cause of LGMD1D. And this is a study, natural history study from Washington University St. Louis regarding LGMD1D. Now the nomenclature has changed. It's now D1. And this you'll see a pattern of muscular dystrophies, limb girdle being item C in the middle, but there's an array of muscular dystrophies that are fairly classic, including Duchenne's on the left, all the way to oculopharyngeal on the right. Again, these are classic, sometimes not common. For instance, LGMD1D can present distally, so you have to keep an open mind. But another point to this slide is there's a pathogenic variant behind all of these, and that's what you're really searching for. So somebody can be included in a natural history study or a therapeutic trial. Now, just a little bit on LGMD symptoms and testing. again, a chronic progressive weakness in the limb girdle area. You can recognize this by patients who have to push up from the floor or a chair using their hands. This is called a Gower sign, difficulty climbing stairs. And oddly enough, a classic question is, can you carry a baby? I cannot. For instance, I don't have the truncal and girdle strength to support holding a baby and walking at the same time. Family history, as you would recognize, is very important. If this is passed through every generation, you're suspicious of autosomal dominant. Again, if it's just in the proband, then it might be autosomal recessive, de novo, or maybe it's not genetic at all, and it's acquired, so you'll have some homework to do. And interestingly enough, it can vary in a family with the same variant. There's a fraternal or identical set of boy twins in the Bay Area that have the autosomal recessive FKRP. One of the sons actually was slow walking and is still slow walking until age 18. The other boy actually was quite active athletically, but is now in a wheelchair at age 18, just to show you that there's some odd evolutions, and again, to keep an open mind. Now, the exam, EMG, nerve conduction studies, MRI, muscle biopsy can all be non-specific, but in some cases helpful, and genetic testing can be definitive for some, not all. Now, in 2015 to 2018, the Muscular Dystrophy Association did free genetic testing on 35 LGMD patients. And as you see the chart on the left, in red, you see quite an array of autosomal recessive limb girdle muscular dystrophies designated by the LGMD2 number. And in the upper right, you'll see the blue area, which is autosomal dominant. And you'll see in the green Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, which is, of course, an X-linked affecting mainly young, mainly young boys. Now, if you look on the right, as you look down the table there, you see DNHAV6 coming in at 5% of the total. In fact, DNHAV6 mutations make up the largest block of autosomal dominant limb girdle muscular dystrophies. Now, again, the case is solved for the diagram, the pie chart that you just saw, but again, most people have a negative test. And the majority will have a what they call a variant of unknown significance, as you're all aware. And this has pretty much been reproduced in many other literature reports. And what I typically get is a panel test which comes back with 3 or 4 VUSs. And usually there's no pathogenic or likely pathogenic. So this is the area that I'll focus on going forward, and everybody is focusing on this. How do you resolve these? Because these people are weak. It seems like a genetic diagnosis, so there's more to do. Now, the LGMD1D Foundation Autosomal Dominant Registry, I founded that in 2018, a 501c3 public charity. And, you know, why did I do this? Well, it's clear that if 80% are autosomal recessive and the pharmacy, the biotech industry interested in those, that the 20% of autosomal dominant are poorly organized and they need a home. They need a place to come to register, so they'll be ready for any kind of research project. So currently we have over 200 members documented with pathogenic variants, and they're worldwide in distribution. I have people in Russia, Europe, Middle East, most are in America and Canada, some in Australia. And again, they have pathogenic variants, so they're ready for recruitment, either in a natural history study or a therapeutic trial. As you know, there's therapy for genetic therapy for autosomal recessive conditions, and there are even a few therapeutic trials on the horizon for autosomal dominant. So again, treatments are on the horizon, genetic therapies, that is. Now, sponsored genetic testing, the foundation started this in 2019 with Invitae. They have a variety of sponsored genetic tests, not only in muscular dystrophy, but others. And the reason we did this, there's just poor access and roadblocks to genetic therapy. Patients are unaware, doctors are unaware, people have just, you know, in locations where, well, they just, insurance companies, the list goes on and on as to why this is not really available and utilized more. Now, for me, how do you qualify to get a sponsored genetic test? Since I'm a physician in California, I can't practice in the other 49 states. So if a patient seeks me out through my website or email or whatever, they need a regular medical doctor. Again, I'm not a genetic counselor, so Invitae has a phone portal and a web portal where they can do formal genetic counseling. So I feel that all bases are covered here as far as family patient follow-up. Logistically, kits get mailed out to patients, they swab, they label it, they send it back, and I forward the test on to their the patients who forward it to their doctors. They sign up for genetic counseling. And then I do the best I can helping them and following them up. Now, to date, we have over 500 people tested. Most of these are probands, but a lot of these are parents and relatives that I've had the opportunity to do segregation analysis. So that's been very helpful in firming up a VUS as a possibility of causing their condition. Now, oddly enough, in 2019, there were only 120 variants in each panel, and now there's up to 330, and Invitae allows you a new panel every year. So some of these patients actually come back for more to suggest that there may be a new variant or an upgrade. Invitae always emails me when there is an upgrade or a downgrade to a VUS. So in 2021, I had enough data to present a poster session at the MDA conference, and I'll present that now. Again, this is sponsored genetic testing as of 2021. The average age was 45. And if you see off to the left, there were approximately 130 patients. Females outnumbered males 2 to 1. Return test was a subset of that. And pathogenic variants, as you'll see in the bottom there, made up 25 to 30%. So we did make a diagnosis in a fair number, which reflects the literature that you've already seen. Now, the variants where there were variants of uncertain significance where family follow-up testing was allowed, which was important in segregation analysis. And then there were variants of unknown significance where no family follow-up testing was allowed, and of course, negative results, a slim minority of those. So it's important that if there are variants of unknown significance and Invitae is curious enough to allow family follow-up testing, that certainly triages or give me a list of which variants may be more rewarding to pursue. So this is a typical panel most of you have seen. This particular gentleman had a late onset muscular dystrophy without any other organ system or syndromic features. It was just lone muscular dystrophy. And in fact, he had DNHAB6, 265T greater than A. And this is, in fact, my exact variant as well. Now, this is what we usually get, though, a myriad of VUSs, pathogenic, likely pathogenic. And the rest of these actually tended to be autosomal recessive or didn't fit clinically, syndromic, what have you. So these all fell off, thankfully. But these are the challenges that I guess most of us face. Now, Invitae allows us a clinical summary, which is helpful, even giving us PubMed IDs so we can do a little research. Oftentimes we would need to do a deeper dive, but this was a pathogenic variant. And of course, the variant details are ACMG type stuff that, certainly does help. And when you're looking at a VUS, this happens to be a pathogenic variant. And this was the answer to this particular person's problem. Now, enter Mastermind Pro. It's a godsend for me as far as VUS resolution. Either they have a diagnosis or the test is completely negative, in which case we look in other directions or pass on the pathogenic diagnosis. But for me, the quick searches cross-referencing are really key, and I'm reassured that they're up-to-date resources, and most important to me, and I'll elaborate on this later, are setting alerts. Now, this is maybe a bit hard to digest, but let me try to explain. In VUS resolution, is there a variant match? Oh, actually, all variant searches give me direction for the patient, and I'll try to explain this. let's say I've searched in Mastermind Pro for a variant and I do not find any articles, and when you look at the adjacent nucleotides and proteins, there's just nothing. You're not even in the ballpark. Then the next step really is whole genome sequencing, and there are three places that do sponsored whole genome sequencing, and I'll elaborate on that a little later. So that's very helpful, because if you're not in the ballpark, you need to give the patient direction. Now, what about if there are articles or no exact variant? Then I refer these people to the cited research group. And as odd as that sounds, I find the emails of the lead authors. They usually have postdocs working in the labs, and they're more than happy to reach out to patients who may have a variant that has heretofore not been recognized. And when you think about it, the regular medical doctor, the pediatrician, even the local neurologist is really not prepared to really carry this on any further. So this has worked in a variety of cases for me. And you're putting your patient in the hands of somebody who can actually, shed some light on this. Now, finally, what about if there are articles found and the variant is there, and the literature is replete with this? Then I consider MDA Connect. If you Google this term right now, Muscular Dystrophy Association Connect, you'll get a website where you put in your zip code, and you'll get the local or the nearest neuromuscular doctors. And most of these patients do not have a neuromuscular doctor. They have a pediatrician and a primary care doctor, a neurologist that really don't know what to do with this. And I'll give an example. I have a patient in Wyoming whose neurologist is a retired cardiologist. So I hear this over and over and over again, and you need to get these patients into competent hands, basically. Also, if the research group is nearby, that's another avenue as well. Now, what about the variability of these and the phenotype? Now, if you get an article with patient demographics and phenotypic descriptions, this is extremely helpful in seeing if your patient does fit clinically. And again, it's another piece of the puzzle that you're on the right track to resolving somebody's VUS. Now, patient follow-up, this, as I mentioned before, this is very, very important. And the reason I say that is you've got a VUS, you probably haven't nailed anything by now. So only time will tell as the explosion in genetic research, is upon us, that setting alerts, you may actually get the diagnosis, and the diagnosis may ultimately depend on this. So I set up alerts routinely, not only for the gene, which sends me articles about what's going on in the gene area, but also the alerts. These are few or far between, the variant alerts, I mean. And again, I'm reassured by getting up-to-date articles. And finally, the patients are so appreciative that while they sleep, that you'll be getting timely articles to the world's literature to help solve their problem. And like I mentioned, I've set up 75 gene alerts and variant alerts to date. And I've got to sift through some that I've received this week, but I get monthly alerts as well. So as I promised, I wanted to give you a case. This was a 27-year-old female with progressive weakness and fasciculations, and the father has the same condition. Now, this would suggest an autosomal dominant process, possibly neuropathic. The Invitae panel suggested that this person was only a carrier, ALS versus Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And these are two neuropathic disorders as opposed to a muscular disorder, which is a disease of the muscle causing CK leak, on and on. Neuropathic disorders are diseases of the nerves causing, again, proximal muscle weakness. So these two can look exactly the same. So it's incumbent upon you to not only look at the muscle genes and variants, but the neuropathic genes and variants as well. So let's look at this is a model of a lower motor neuron with the purple aspect sitting in the spinal cord and extending out to the muscles, and so any kind of membrane problem which can cause what we call fasciculations, which are little worm-like motions under the muscle. They're either benign fasciculations if there's no weakness involved, or it suggests ALS if there is weakness involved. So I had a feeling that this person, in fact, did have ALS or does have ALS, and this was her INVITE panel, which showed the DHTKD1 variant pathogenic, and in the description it says it's autosomal dominant and autosomal recessive and includes metabolic conditions. The other two variants were not germane in this particular search. And again, so this was 330 variants, and this did seem suspicious, although the doctor said not to worry, that this patient is only a carrier. Now, this was a clinical summary. As you see here, mentioned again, Charcot-Marie-Tooth and ALS. These are two neuropathic disorders, and they are classified as autosomal dominant here. And then when you look at the variant details, unfortunately, something popped up the allele frequency was actually incredibly high for this to be a pathogenic disorder. So, but they still label it as pathogenic. So I did my own independent research looking at other frequency tables and found that it's actually a little more rare than INVITE led to believe. And usually I communicate with INVITE and kind of go over these discrepancies. But again, this case came to me about 4 weeks ago, and I had other cases I was going to share in my archives. But since this was the most current, I just put this out there for your education. Now, I did the Mastermind search, and instead of going through this live, I made slides that I think illustrate the most important points. And I want to emphasize that it took less time for me to find all these articles and put this case together than I took to make these slides. So I just want to show you how efficient it is for me, to get to these answers. So here you'll see I queued up the gene and the variant, and I got 41 articles, this being the top article here, showing that, in fact, yes, heterogeneous DHTKD1 was in fact associated with ALS. You see here 9 variants, an exact match, and of course the genes, the 41 articles. And now we look at go back to the gene page of Mastermind Pro, and we look at 729 here. And when I research each of these variants, it's not exactly in an autosomal dominant hotspot, but again, the 41 articles here, missense mutation, but still I felt I was in the ballpark. And this was a study that came up. This was a German group that put this on the map. And when you look in the body of the article, you see the gene here, you see the variant, you see the allele frequency here, and you see the predictive mutations, and then plus the ACMG criteria over here. So again, I still feel like I'm on solid footing, that this is the smoking gun. Now, when you look deeper, you look at the demographics, the phenotypes here, and this was a comparison of the ALS patients who had this variant, again, 10, versus the ALS patients who did not have this variant. Again, you see this 215, 212, and you see that the age of onset here was a little 49 to 73 in the usual ALS without the DHTKD1. It's 25. So again, our patient was 27 years old. I think the father was a little older. Duration fit, they'd both been around 2.5 years. And again, our patient presented with spinal and no bulbar symptoms. So again, other than the age of onset, I still felt that this was a clinical match. One other article that I thought was hopeful, where in a research group, again, one variant was cited here in this research group, that in fact vitamins B1, B3, B6 could be effective in overcoming this variant pathophysiology in Charcot-Marie-Tooth. But they go on to show, this is the paper, a Russian group, but they go on to show that in fact this variant was also responsible for ALS. And so again, Charcot-Marie-Tooth, ALS, they're both neuropathic disorders. presumably from the same a pathogenic problem. And here they show the problems in the metabolism of tryptophan, where taking thiamine or niacin may in fact counteract the pathophysiologic defect of this particular variant. So as I told you, I set up alerts. I set up alert for ALS, Charcot-Marie-Tooth, and I set up the gene. And I also set up the gene and the variant. Again, I did this June 8th, and I get monthly frequencies. You know, and again, I've set up 75 of my own, just to repeat. Now, again, how are we going to help these patients? Again, we may still be at the VUS stage. And so again, the important things that I've assembled are the Mastermind alerts. Again, patients appreciate this. I appreciate this. This may be the only way to solve this going forward. MDA Connect, as I said before, you want to get these patients into competent neuromuscular physicians who can actually help. A sponsored whole genome sequencing. NIH, Harvard, and Stanford have portals where patients can apply, and many of my patients have. If you have a multi-organ system problem, it may be a mitochondrial disorder. So this group will do mitochondrial genetic testing, which of course is different from somatic and germline. Moving on, muscle biopsy. Point one is that if you have a panel testing in front of you, if you're a patient with 4 VUSs and you have muscle weakness, then one of those may show up as a protein that is not expressed in the muscle. So it gives the pathologist a roadmap to, hey, maybe one of these 4 I should stain for, or maybe I should take a piece of muscle and do RNA-seq and see if one of these VUSs is not performing as far as DNA producing, RNA producing a protein. So I think it's important to coach a patient to give them this roadmap if they're entertaining a muscle biopsy. Muscle biopsy point number 2, University of Iowa is a neuropath center for second opinions all across the nation, and they also have a tissue bank. So if you're a patient considering a muscle biopsy, most research centers, university centers will send their tissue off for a second opinion, but also I coach patients to get a second tissue sample and save it, because if they enter a study or if they enter a natural history study or a therapeutic trial, the center's going to want a piece of tissue. And so why have to go for a second muscle biopsy when you've already saved a piece? So finally, social gene matching sites. A lot of my patients like to take things into their own hands, and they actually register not all their VUSs plus their symptoms in RareX, Gene Connect, and MyGene2, and it gives them a sense of power. And sometimes they put me on as a second email, and so sometimes I get hits as well that people are getting matches. So again, let's try to solve this problem. Let's put together things that might help, especially if they're sponsored. There's so many roadblocks and pitfalls to making a diagnosis. If time allows, I think I've got a little more time here. I assembled some interesting cases over the years. This is Olivia. She was the youngest of a 5-member family. The mother and father were asymptomatic. Her 2 older brothers were asymptomatic, but at age 7, she had progressive muscular weakness and went to a research center where she had a muscle biopsy. And she was diagnosed with myofibrillar myopathy, likely due to FLNC. And the parents came to me when she was age 12 and said, hey, can you run a test on us? I said, sure. And lo and behold, came back for homozygous SNM1 homozygous deletion. She actually had SMA and was promptly referred to a therapeutic center, and she's getting spinal injections of genetic therapy. And the family said that her walking has improved, stabilized, and has improved. But the tragedy here is that she waited 5 years to get a real diagnosis. Second, this is Julian. He's a young African-American boy in the backwaters of Alabama. Her mom approached me. He had two older male siblings who were also weak, but not as weak as him. not sure the pediatrician knew what to do, but he asked me if Julian could be tested. And in fact, he came back to Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, as well as his two older brothers. So they were hooked up with an MDA clinic and were appropriately triaged to some form of therapy. Next is Sarah. She, at age 18, was having muscle weakness, CKs of 6,000. She had a muscle biopsy that was myopathic. She had a genetic panel that looked like this, nothing but VUSs. And the NO5s looked suspicious for LGMD2L. That's an NO5 myopathy, but of course, she lived in Florida. She had a neuromuscular doctor in Dallas, and just come back every year, check in with me. So anyway, I took it upon myself to do her parents, her mom and her dad each had one of these variants. So we knew this was in the trans position for her, but that's all we knew. She's now age 35, and lo and behold, Invitae let me know that, wow, one of those NO5s is likely pathogenic. That was a year later. And then 2 years later, in 2024, they sent back, wow, the other one's likely pathogenic. So I hooked her up with Sarepta, and they're doing a therapeutic trial of NO5 LGMD2L myopathies. So, the message here is set your alerts, and time may reveal all. Now, one more article I want to share with you. This came across my desk 2 weeks ago about whole genome sequencing. And when this stuff hits my medical literature, regular doctors are starting to wake up, thankfully. So again, they found that doing whole genome sequencing when everything else is done may yield results. And these two slides show you in the dark blue what they diagnosed using whole gene sequencing, and the families that remained in the neuromuscular remained undiagnosed, unfortunately. And this is the money slide, a bit complicated, but basically, if you look at the dark blue, the whole genome sequencing here is what they found, and it was 8% of the total. But what you don't appreciate is they just went over the whole exome studies that had been done before, and that with new information, new variants on the map, they were able to make a diagnosis. So in fact, their yield was probably a 30% instead of the 8% that they reported. So again, the whole genome sequencing would figure out things that exome wouldn't. These are hidden deep intronic, this and that. So anyway, their conclusions were that, again, whole genome sequence is worthwhile to the tune of 8%. Actually, if you just go over your old data, you may make a diagnosis. So this is, I think I'm on the right track here. I think we all are on the right track. Just to emphasize that maybe general doctors are waking up that this is important. Now, closing out here, this is my website. People can register here. They can support persons can register here. You can get sponsored testing here. Here's my archived newsletters, videos, and channels. You can support me by a variety of means. I accept cryptocurrency. And I'd like to give a shout out to Genomic. They've been very supportive of me over the years. And so concluding the road ahead, again, a genetic diagnosis shouldn't take 30 years. I think that the pieces are there that we could do this in 6 months, given all the sophisticated testing that's out there. Although there's still going to be access to genetic testing due to insurance, due to poor education among physicians. I think the general medical community are undertrained in genetic testing. I think this information is leapfrogged over the average physician. And I think we need to train medical subspecialists because they're with genetic diagnoses, because they're more adept at sorting out what's acquired, versus what may be genetic. And I found Mastermind has been the most efficient tool for me with real-time clinical application. And I'll stop there and thank you for being with me. And these are my contact things. They'll be included in the chat as well. And I will close this out now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lowery. It looks like we have some time for a few questions that have come in. So looks like we put in the chat your contact info and ways to get in touch with you, because that was one of the questions, is the best way to reach out. So you'll find that in the chat, everyone. But one question that came in is, are there other sponsored panels, and how can people find out about those?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. Yes, if you browse Invite and sponsored tests, there's really probably about 30 different panels ranging from cardiology to ophthalmology to metabolic to bone to, there's just a ton out there. And if you're a switched on specialist, but people have come to me. There was a person with short stature. There was a person with genetic blindness. There have been several cardiology families have approached me because of sudden cardiac death in their families, and they wanted to know if they had a particular gene. So again, these are not my area of expertise, but I'm willing to help out. But most of these tests cost around $250 if they're not covered by insurance. And for the average patient, I think, you're worth $250 to find out, even if you don't have insurance coverage.
Awesome. Thank you. And then let's see, maybe one more question. How often is it that you're finding that patients are getting reanalysis?
Well, Invite offers a yearly update because every year the number of variants go up. So I asked the patients to put their test date on a calendar and then notify me. And a lot have been good about that. For some reason, it's plateaued over the last year. It's plateaued at 330 variants. Now, again, 230 of those variants are muscular, and 101 of those are neuropathic. So it's important to know that that those are if you're going to present with proximal muscle weakness, it's generally muscular or neuropathic. Sometimes it's metabolic, like Pompe's disease, but that too is covered in the Invite panel. So a lot of patients ask me, did you cover for this? Do you cover for that? But I feel very confident that we're covering that. And again, there are other avenues for patients, including sponsored whole genome sequence. But what I'm asking this audience to do is to also refer me, sponsored websites, sponsored testing centers, because that's what I rely on. These patients are poor. Sometimes they can't, they have insurance hassles. And really, I just rely on goodwill, basically, to try to do all I can to make these diagnoses.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Let's see. How have you utilized alerts in Mastermind in the ongoing management of your patients?
Okay, this is key. This is key. I can't say this enough, that, when you set up a gene alert and a variant alert, you tell the patient, look, while you're sleeping, we are combing the world's literature. And sometimes all patients have all you can give them is hope. That's number one. Number two, when I get a gene article back, I start reading it because I want to educate myself on LGMD genes. So you're becoming a better clinician. When I get a variant alert, I pass that on to the patient because they want to know. And it really builds up this trusting relationship that you're on top of it, you're going to do it. And really this whole area, subspecialists with genetic background, I think it's going to be a new subspecialty. I think Genomic will be kind of leading the edge in educating physicians, and actually offering maybe a degree of some sort. But anyway, Genomic has been very helpful for me.
That's fantastic. Okay, one last question. So this one, thank you for the discussion of these interesting cases. You mentioned that by using Mastermind, you were able to find the answer or data for classifying the variant in a short time. How do you sort through the data when there are hundreds of published articles?
Well, that is where Mastermind comes in handy, because you can start cross-referencing to exactly what you want. And every time I go back to Mastermind, I learn how to cross-reference better. I mean, it's just an acquired skill, and you have to keep going back and keep. And then I'm sure the Mastermind staff will be happy to give you sort of a didactic. And again, there'll be a variant breakout. That'll be a great area. And so this leads right into the breakout rooms.
Yeah, you really teed me up for that. Thank you again so much for that. And it's really fantastic to have heard this really unique perspective of Mastermind from the vantage point of an MD. Many Mastermind users and maybe many of you out there are variant analysts, clinical genomic scientists, but it all comes back to the patient, right? So it's nice to spend time reflecting on that and hearing these stories. So we really appreciate and admire the work that you're doing, Dr. Lowery, for these patients with this rare disease. So thank you very much. Before we jump into the breakout sessions, we do have another poll question that should be popping up on your screen imminently. So we will take a minute or two to do this poll. Should be popping up. And just as a follow-up, while you all are answering the poll question, just to follow up to that last question we got about Mastermind and filtering down those instances where there are lots of papers, we are going to have one of the breakout sessions all about how to use Mastermind. So we can definitely talk more in depth. Whoever asked that, we can chat about filtering strategies and adding specificity to your search, because there are definitely lots of tools within the system that you can use to narrow down your search. So happy to chat more about that. I'm going to let the poll run just for a little bit longer. So next thing on our agenda is going to be the breakout sessions. Like we mentioned, we're going to have 3 sessions. Each is going to be led by a member of the Genomic team. You'll see the options available for these sessions shortly on your screen. You'll be able to choose which room you want to join. The sessions are going to last 30 minutes. This is really your opportunity to learn about the topic, ask any questions you may have to the expert leading your session. I know we haven't had audio and video on for the attendees so far, but you are going to have that option once you do join your breakout room. So feel free to turn on your camera and unmute yourself, have conversations in these breakout rooms. We want to have that kind of environment. So the 3 options for the sessions are going to be breakouts for variant curation, which is going to be led by Jessica Bugarin, and then gene curation, which is going to be led by Jeffrey Bissonette. And then the third is going to be the Mastermind training workshop. And that's really for all levels of experience and familiarity with Mastermind. So that's going to be led by me. After the breakout sessions, we'll all be brought back into this main room together, and we'll have some closing presentations from Britt Jones, who is our VP of Product Strategy and Product Management. So she'll give you some insights into the product roadmap, give you a chance to tell us what you think about that. We'll also be raffling off some fun prizes at the end too, so you don't want to miss that. You should see the breakout room options here shortly, and hope to see some of you in the training workshop.
Hey, thanks everyone. I believe we have the folks back into the main room here. Mark and Denise, well, first, thank you for participating with us today. Thanks for sticking around, and for our individual breakout rooms. Those, I think, were really informative. I hope you got your questions answered. I know we really appreciate the feedback. That feedback then goes into looking forward. As you see, I'm going to focus more, and we're going to have a poll question come up right now about in just a second about what is the biggest limitation you see using Mastermind? We use this information for our product development. We absolutely listen to our users' feedback, take that into account. In fact, you'll probably often get an email from either Denise or Dan, our product manager on the Mastermind side, who then tells you, yes, we put that into the software. So we really appreciate and would love some of your feedback on this poll. So I'm going to give you just a second here to read the questions and to answer that as you can. As folks read in that time, I think I was introduced in the very beginning, but let me go ahead and introduce myself again. I'm Brittany Jones. I am in charge. I am the VP of both our product strategy as well as the product management team. So we are in charge of making sure we make you the best product, curating the best genes in the best way, and putting that forward into Mastermind in an easy to digest and look at information. So what I'm going to do here is give you a little bit of a view into some of the key features that we're looking at on our roadmap. I know Mark had something just like this in the beginning, which is, we really look at our software or our products and services as 3 distinct components, and I'm going to add a 4th a little bit. So we have the software, the data itself, the services, which I won't focus on today. And then I'm going to add in actually some of the work we're doing around AI. I know that is a bucket term and everyone's favorite hot word, but I'll go into the actual fundamental, what we are doing in AI. Next one. So on the software side, what we consider software is obviously Mastermind. So one of the things we're doing here is actually adding something called community features. There'll be another poll question at the end that I'll get some feedback of what you think in just a couple of minutes. I'll get some feedback. We'll get some feedback on what you think should be the highest priority on all of these, because we love to deliver, again, exactly what it is you want in the software. These community features are the ability to do things like, I want to save an article. I reviewed this article when I searched a variant. I thought it was good, right? I'm going to use this for my curation, and I want to share that with my entire team. That's an idea of a community feature. It's the ability to save things onto not just your personal account, but then share that information both with your organization. So I'd be able to share that to Genomic because I'm part of Genomic, or put that out to the larger community, right? Genomic classified this variant as a VUS, but I have a patient. I'm just letting everyone know that, you'll find that information soon in ClinVar. Something of that nature where you can really use that information to flag. We update ClinVar on a weekly cadence, so hopefully we'll get that information quickly. But in that way, you'd be able to share some of that information, or, we thought this about X. The community features will also allow for, again, at your organization to then say, I use this information. No one else has to review that article. No one else has to look at it and say, okay, I also reviewed it, a week later. So articles, sharing classification, sharing feedback to Genomic, sharing your interpretation of the VSEPs. All of that will go into the community features. We're also adding the ability to search based on information that doesn't necessarily just have genetic or genomic information. So right now in the software, we demand that you have a gene, a variant, a copy number variant, something where we can center that on a genomic piece of information, especially given that we just, as Mark announced in the beginning, right, we acquired the CKB database. That information is very relevant and very valid to things like disease and therapies, and the links across those, right? So lung cancer and a specific therapeutic. In that way, we really want to open the searching to be more available. You can come in with a list of 3 to 4 phenotypes with your diagnostic odyssey, see all the genes and variants, how often they're mentioned, how different articles. So how frequent is my seizures and ataxia with my SCN2A, right? So you could use that as part of your prioritization, just coming in with phenotypes, looking across all those phenotypes for a gene, for a variant. In that same way, again, disease therapeutics, this will open up the world so you don't have to start with knowing what genetic information you're looking for. Now on the data side, so that's really the functionality in Mastermind. On the data side, we have and are continuing to build in the back end the ability to update for the upcoming guidelines. I think we all know these guidelines are coming out. It's just a matter of when and exactly how they specify, but there were some fundamental changes. So some of those are, are the appropriateness of all the criteria, adjustable strengths of every one of those, and then quantitative parameters that are summed across articles. So not specifically, a specific article and that PMID supports that. It can be several articles that together sum to support criteria and put you across a threshold. In that way, we're actually going to show information that doesn't necessarily isn't sufficient to fully enact a criteria. And so what I mean by that is we're going to actually give you, our curators spend a lot of time in the software doing something very similar to what probably a lot of you do, which is looking at how many families, the uniqueness of those families, And then how many meioses, case individuals, are there within those families, right? And how does that track? That information will become available in Mastermind. So we're actually, instead of just focusing on giving you a sentence fragment that is for a singular article, we're actually going to be saying, okay, across these 3 articles, still giving you those PMIDs, still showing our work. Across these 3 articles, you know, this is the number of unique families that we found in those articles. We are tagging duplicates, things like that in the back end. Our curators spend a lot of time making sure that those families are, that information is unique. Same, we're doing that with the functional studies. We're beginning to add information about the type of functional study that you'll find in that article. This is a non-human primate. This is a mouse model. This was a expression study, right? Something of that nature. So then that way also you'll be able to know going in the strength of those different functional studies. Next one. Great. As I said, I'm going to introduce the 3rd topic, which is actually the AI. So we have a team of folks here at Genomic that are focused only on the AI for us. And what that means is they're really they're focusing right now on two distinct projects, and this will then open the world for other distinct projects that we can do. The first we're calling gene disambiguation, which is a fun name for trying to figure out the information on the right side of the slide, which is trying to figure out if a gene mention, or a protein mention in this case, is actually a gene mention, right? Is this information, not only is it according to the right acronym, but often authors will do exactly this, which, the author capitalized that, said PAH. But this article was specifically about the protein, right? If you look at the text that's around that, it's talking about a crystal structure determination of this protein. And that way we can then tag that information. You can use that or not as you see fit, but we'll be able to tell you that, this is a protein mention. You may not want to pay attention to this article. Right? So you're not going to spend time going into every single one of those articles, looking at proteins, looking at other words that they may use, diseases where they use acronyms that are same as genes, all of that. So this is contextual disambiguation of what is a gene, or when was an author actually talking about the gene. Also, contextual information is smart tagging. What we're talking about here is actually telling you in advance if an article has clinical type evidence in it, functional type evidence. I think we're at 11 categories and counting here. So we can tell you if a variant is talked about in a somatic context or if it's talked about in a germline context within that specific article. So basically, every time we see those genes, those variant mentions, we're then looking at the text around that and saying, we predict this to be talked about in a germline context. In that way, it's much easier for us to differentiate between something that we've said is, someone doesn't go in and say, this is normally germline and not somatic, right? Those 2 words now weigh evenly. Well, with large language model based AI, we can actually say to that, okay, they're saying germline, it was germline. And so that information will then be surfaced. You'll be able to look at those articles and say, okay, give me all the clinical ones, predicted clinical. You're looking for things with patients, cases, case reports, right? We're going to be surfacing that. And if I'm at the variant level, I don't want to see all those review articles, right? So we'll go ahead and tag those review articles for you. And then that way you can say, I'm going to deprioritize those for my workflow. So this will give you options by surfacing information up front before you have to spend time actually curating those articles. Next one. Great. Now, given some of that information and some of the directions that we're looking for, what capabilities would you find most useful, most valuable in your workflow? So this poll question, please give us your feedback. We really, really appreciate this, and we'd really appreciate, knowing what folks want to see. At any point in time, also, I will say, please email support@Genomic if you want to give us any recommendations. We have weekly guidance meetings where we take customer feedback. We say, okay, now we've heard this one specific thing 3 times. Great. That means something that we're going to prioritize that. So if we don't know what you want, we can't prioritize it, but we absolutely prioritize changes in the software based on requests from our customers. We want to make what you want to see. With that, I think the poll is going to stay up for another few seconds or minutes, but I am going to hand this over to Mark.
Thank you, Britt. I hope I can be seen and heard. Really, to emphasize what Britt had said, we seek to be guided by our users' needs in their efforts to do some of the great work that was highlighted by Dr. Lowery, serving the patients. And so I'm asked to close the conversation here. I'll begin in the closing with where we started the whole user group today with an update. So I gave a sort of year in review. There's actually an opportunity here to have a decade in review. If you didn't know, Genomic is a decade old. This is me in a callow phase of my life. It's also a little fuzzy. And I think that's appropriate because I didn't really have a clear vision of what Genomic would become. And as the years have progressed and we've been working with Mastermind users and bringing on board talented people like the folks that you've been interacting with on this webinar, our mission has become much clearer. The resolution with which we can see the ending of our mission, the goal that we're seeking, highlighted by the race to curate the germline clinical exome, that is becoming clearer and sharper focus. And so from 2014, when I was just a babe in the woods, having founded Genomic with a nebulous vision, now to 2024 with a much clearer, much more focused ambition. We have an enemy in our sights. That enemy is the VUS that Dr. Lowery highlighted so clearly with his case examples and his own experience. Why has that become our mission? I think that's pretty apparent to folks on the call, but it is to unlock the power of every patient's genome by understanding the variants and their meaningfulness. And that comes in two forms. One is in the clinical setting. How can we better diagnose patients? How can we help you better diagnose patients? Surfacing the evidence that's needed, sometimes a single article, sometimes as was highlighted with Mastermind Alerts that comes out, after a diagnosis is rendered or an attempt for a diagnosis has passed by, new information comes out on a weekly basis. So ensuring that the accuracy of the diagnosis for every patient is paramount, whether they have a genetic disease or cancer or even risk for future diseases. The other side of that coin is in helping pharmaceutical companies better design, better develop drugs and drug programs to treat those patients. And so that's work that we haven't highlighted here, but it is coming out of the data that we've amassed that users of Mastermind see on a daily basis. I mentioned at the beginning that we are mission driven. We are driven by patients. They're at the center of everything that we do. Our customers, our clients, the Mastermind users, are central to that mission as well, helping diagnose those patients suffering with genetic disease and cancer, helping our pharma clients develop those targeted therapeutics, and breaking this bioinformatic bottleneck that I had heard about so much in 2014. And what was my ambition in creating Genomic was to break that bottleneck, to open up new DNA sequencing applications, an example being newborn sequencing, that without this information so readily accessible, so thoroughly annotated, so expertly curated, we wouldn't be able to even conceive of some of those applications from 10 years ago. I can only imagine what we'll be able to do in another 10 years in 2034. And so Britt got the fun task of talking a little bit, just giving you a peek into what we're doing with advanced computational techniques, more sophisticated AI techniques that are coming down the pike. We have been using computational techniques like named entity recognition and genomic language processing for the duration, since we founded the company 10 years ago. It's always been married to the work of dedicated experts, some of whom have been on this call. More than 100 folks, extremely talented, very well educated, very passionate about the detail and the meaningfulness of that detail. This is a powerful combination approach of genomic intelligence, the human form and the computational form. And so all of that work that Britt foreshadowed from the AI realm, you can rest assured is being linked with the curation capability that we have amassed in our team members. And so I'll end here by saying, please do talk to us. We take your input up avidly. And as Britt said, it's pretty much a straight line from your voice into our plans. Give us suggestions, give us insight, tell us what you think is working. That's important. Tell us what you think is not working and what you think we can do better at, as well as any general commentary. We love hearing stories like those that were highlighted by Dr. Lowery. We don't hear them often enough. If you've got stories like that you want to share, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You'll notice that a poll question came up. We'd appreciate, in this vein, you filling that poll out as well. And I will conclude with an announcement of some winners. So I won't call out all your names or where you're from, but Diana, Catherine, and Esther, you will be reached out to get coordinated with delivery of these items, as well as sizing and that sort of thing. But we're happy to present you as winners with a sweatshirt, a very nice sweatshirt. I wear it almost every other day, and also a handy mug and water bottle. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention, and especially for your feedback and your willingness to share that with us. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you all for joining.